Ladies and gentlemen, let's get into the video. We have a bit of an update concerning AMD and their class action lawsuit. To get everyone up to speed, you may recall that a chap by the name of Tony Dickey is claiming that the processor is not a true 8-core CPU. And indeed, he claims that it's more a quad-core and that AMD are effectively misleading, mismarketing and breaking customer trust. Now, at the moment, of course, we're waiting for a final court case and we're not really sure whether it's going to go to court, whether it's going to be settled out of court, but it would appear that AMD have made a decision of what they're going to be doing. AMD have officially replied and responded to the allegations with a rather short and sweet statement. We believe our marketing accurately reflects the capabilities of the Bulldozer architecture, which we implement in an 8-core AMD FX processor, and it is capable of running 8 instructions concurrently, end quote. While this is a fairly short update, it is also a rather important one, because it does mean that it probably will go to court and it won't be settled out of court, which many people assumed it may well be. Now, as we all know, AMD have had some problems financially, but I feel that their case is pretty strong here. Now, of course, like a lot of stuff in technology, it really is down to interpretation, particularly when one deals with marketing. And we all know that there have been so many rebrands. To be honest, I'm quite shocked that there hasn't been a court case regarding rebrands. As far as I'm aware, GPU rebrands, CPU rebrands haven't had a court case. I'm possibly mistaken on that, but I'm really surprised there haven't been at least more of a thing made of it. But in this case, I'm fairly confident that the judge will side with AMD, because to be fair to them, they have been rather, I would say they've been rather honest with their statements. I would argue that the only problem they have as a company in terms of the interpretation of the law is whether the judge would argue that the average person would not understand what a floating point core is, or what an integer is, or what have you. And even if they were to understand an integer, what an integer is, would they therefore understand what the impact of having 2 integer cores is versus having 1 floating point core? Possibly, potentially they would, but probably not. That's what the argument would be. I feel that a lot of the case would hinge upon that. However, let me just illustrate something for you who are not too familiar with how the review process works with hardware. When you as a reviewer receive a piece of hardware, whatever that is, let's say for the sake of argument a graphics card, a CPU, a stick of memory, whatever. This happened to us with Kingston, it happened when we reviewed LG, the phone, it happened when we reviewed the AMD CPU, the FX 8350, the Nvidia hardware. It doesn't matter. You receive a guide, and that guide basically will tell you X, Y and Z. This is what the product is, these are the hardware specifications, these are the best environments. This is generally a performance guide of what you'll get. Typically they'll also highlight what system they're using to test. So for the sake of argument, if it's a GTX 970 you get for a review, they will say this is tested on this processor with this motherboard, this amount of RAM, with these graphics driver revisions, and this version of Windows with these with this software. So for the sake of argument, they might say, oh, I don't know, Far Cry 4 running this version at this resolution with these graphics settings. And the reason they do that is so that at least you as a reviewer have a genuine idea, a general idea of how the hardware works, what type of performance you'll get out of it. So for the sake of argument, let's say you're getting half the performance if they're getting, then obviously there's something wrong. Either they're completely lying about their hardware, or you've got something misconfigured. It gives you kind of like a baseline and a jumping off point, and also it cuts down your questions to them. So for the sake of argument, if you're writing an article regarding a piece of hardware or a processor, you might have a genuine question. Hey, I'm not too familiar, or I'm not too certain how X works on your marketing literature. It's not too clear. Could you tell me? And we have asked RGT, have asked AMD before, hey, when we're trying to review your R9 whatever, could you give us a bit of an insight into how X works on the architecture? And AMD are always forthcoming. And I could say that from an honest point of view. AMD have never lied to us, they've never misled us, they've always been ridiculously honest, actually to a fault. And any of the marketing slides that we've got regarding the FX cores have been abundantly clear. They've not tried to fudge it, they've not tried to lie, they've not tried to hide it. It's been abundantly clear to the tech enthusiast sites, the reviewers, how this stuff works. The problem is, while I feel enthusiasts understand this stuff, I do wonder how many average people will understand this stuff. But this, unfortunately, is a problem that could even be extended to things such as internet or mobile phones. And this is a big, huge, gargantuan problem in not just the tech industry, but just for the sake of argument, how many people do you know who get, let's say for the sake of argument, you get a 50 megabyte connection. How many people do you know have been like, man, I don't download at 50 megabytes per second? And of course, we all know the reasons why, you know, Mbps and all of that, but most people assume, hey, I've got a 50 megabyte connection. And it's just a thing where people don't really understand the difference between kilobytes, megabytes, and obviously, if you're technically inclined, which I'm assuming you probably are if you're listening to me, rant about this subject, or rant, but discuss this subject. But if you're the average person, you really don't understand most of this. And you might understand the difference between megabytes per second as say kilobytes, and you certainly will understand the difference most likely between gigabytes and megabytes if you use a computer regularly, but megabytes per second, Mbps, megabits per second, do you? Possibly, potentially. It's just one of those things, and a real big issue with technical slides. And the reason that I'm more inclined to side with AMD regarding this rather than NVIDIA with the GTX 970 fiasco is with GTX 970, the technical slides which were provided to reviewers did not highlight the memory problems. Not problems, but the inner workings of the memories, the ROMs, and all of that stuff. And the reason also indicates that there was an internal problem with NVIDIA and their communication, and that has not happened with AMD. And I'm not saying that NVIDIA intended to lie about the internal workings. I genuinely believe they screwed up, and there was a miscommunication between the marketing department and the technical department and reviewers. I don't believe NVIDIA actually intended for that to be the case. And the reason I don't believe that they intended that is because I feel that eventually someone would have found it out. However, then you've got the way that GPU-Z and other things were actually reading the GPU, so there is that bit of a question. Anyway, let me know your thoughts and opinions on this one. Fallout has just installed, so I'm going to get going. Take care, my friends. Bye for now.